welcome to another installment where this is Glenn Henderson and we're talking about winning with Glenn. And today, as we've been talking about the top 10, this is a top 10 list on things that people do that typically leads to failure.
Welcome to the Win with Glenn video podcast, where Glenn Henderson and special guests will give you the tips, insight, and tools you need to grow, develop your business and career. Go with us as we dive into the best practices and rock-solid principles that will elevate you and bring proven success. Now, here's Glenn Henderson.
In this installment, we're going to be talking about things that leads to failure, the top 5, top 10 things that lead to failure, characteristics, habits, Jim, and thank you again for being here. I'm not even welcoming you anymore because you're here. Right. It's like you're a fixture. So thank you for being here on these, which critical foundational pieces to rock solid principles as we set up the course to look at other companies and lives and things. But I know people like to talk about success, winning, and we are going to talk about success, winning, and the millionaire next door and the top 10 things that but you can learn so much from people who have failed,
sometimes more,
or who have fallen.
Well, you can learn what not to do.
That's right.
We don't want you to. We don't want you to fail.
That's right.
And we don't want you to do these things.
Right.
I said to someone when I had a bad situation, he said, "Excuse me, tell me what you learned." And I said, "I don't learn anything." Mm-hmm. And I started talking, and he goes, and it was like an hour later, and he goes, "Wow. That was a learning experience."
Right.
You learned what not to do, because I kept
right.
saying, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do this again, and I never do that again. So,
and that's the way, and I know that may be counterintuitive to a lot of people because they usually, can you give me some good news and I want to have some motivational, and I'm not into the motivational, but I do want to motivate people.
Well,
but
if
I
you're
don't
successful, you'll be motivated.
Right. I don't want to be motivational,
right,
but I do want to motivate you.
Exactly.
And so part of that process is, I may not be able to, I tell folks all the time, but you just said it, I may not be able to tell you what to do, but I can certainly tell you what not to do. And so, and it's sometimes.
And it's part of counting the cost, right? You got to go into these things. If you're going to own a business, you're going to do that, you've got to count the cost.
Right.
Because if you don't count the cost, you're going to count the cost.
Right.
And it's not going to be pleasant. So let's deal with and I have students of mine who say, I don't like the word problem. Mm-hmm. Really? Okay, well, so when you run into a non-problem, give me a call.
Right.
There are problems, there are challenges and so on. Call them for what they are, deal with them, have a plan. So one of the first things I think is to avoid failure is to have a plan.
Right.
Don't dive into something. Let me give you one quick example. There's a young lady in Indiana, and her name is Rhonda, and she came to me. We were working together at IU, and she said, I bake cakes, beautiful cakes, and she showed me a portfolio of the most amazing. I just couldn't take my eyes off of it. Just fantastic. Mm-hmm. And I didn't see her as an artist. I saw her as a writer,
right,
and a trainer. She said, I want to start this business. Sweet Cakes by Rhonda is what she said. And she was making a little money on the side, doing things. And I said, all right, well, let me see your business plan. Well, she had no plan. She had some cake pans and some flour and, and she rented out somebody's kitchen when she needed it and so on. But she didn't have anything in writing.
Right.
So I started sitting with her and we were putting things, and she'd tell you this. It was painful,
Mm-hmm.
Well, how about this and this? And we got a plan together. We did some planning together, right? She's been hugely successful. Right. And she looks back at that. And I know she hated every minute of it, but every minute of it was helpful to her.
Well, that's the key thing. So the first thing that I've noticed, and you just said there, literally, and it's common throughout all, and when I say failure, that's when because we define failure, but when people do not realize their goals, their dreams, etc., that when you look underneath the hood, there was either poor planning or no planning. There or no forecast. And I'm reminded the forecast has to be realistic. And that's when you must have a savant or some being savant. And having one,
I am not.
going somewhere, but you have to have somebody that you can look to, a sage, or somebody that team that I mentioned that you can go to and help you put together a plan that's realistic.
Yeah.
It's not a pipe dream.
Right.
It's not, here's what I think,
Yeah.
because there's some rules and there's some benchmarking from research that needs to be put into place that says, well, now here, and virtually everyone that I've seen, people have lacked a realistic
And there are
forecast.
I learned this from you years ago.
For planning.
There are financial models,
Mm-hmm.
right? That are already out there. They're proven financial models for various industries, various types of businesses. You taught me this. And the business that I'm in, I never thought about that. That's not part of my life. I didn't grow up thinking of it. I didn't have it in my education. But that's part of that forecasting, looking at those models,
Right.
those financial models to see how profitable we're going to be, what our expenses are
Yep.
going to be, our costs and overhead are going to be, etc. And so the more you can do of that on the front end, the less trouble you're going to have later.
Right. I think, and so as a best practice in a rock solid principle, you need to do three. I'm going to say you need to do, and people lack this, you need to do three models.
Okay.
You need to do, and all of them are realistic in theory. And when I say realistic, because they're just forecasts, but you're going to do some real, it's the what ifs.
What if?
So the one model is, well, I'm going to say conservative. What happens, here's what I think, here's what the research says, here's what I think is going to happen. What if it doesn't?
Okay.
So now I'm falling short of my so-called budget.
Okay.
What will I do if it does happen? So that's model two. And then the one that everybody hopes for, but are not prepared for. And that is, suppose the whole world loves what I'm doing and I become overwhelmed.
They called it.
And a lot of people, and you see this on the show, we're going to do a focus on Shark Tank on one of our episodes and installments here. And how many times, I don't know how many episodes you've seen of Shark Tank where a
Quite a
person
few.
said they get this thing called a bump or a lift
Right.
just by being on Shark Tank. And what do most of them invariably say? It almost killed us
Either
because
killed you
they
or
weren't
put you out of
prepared.
business. Right.
Because see, so the very thing that I wanted, I wasn't prepared for.
Right.
And so if I sit down,
Three things. If it doesn't work, how am I going to respond?
and you have that plotted out.
Right.
So you have
Made a decision ahead
It's
of
an
time.
algorithm. If this, then that. So, and you plan for it. So you say, well, now I see, based upon this not working, slow response.
Right.
8 months from now, we're
But
still
you know,
not
that
going to
doesn't sound. That doesn't
no,
sound.
But if
right.
you plan for this, then you're going to say in 8 months, or I always use the Clint Eastwood line: a man's got to know his limitations.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
so,
that's it. Yeah.
so if I see 8 months from now, I'm going to be upside down. People aren't going to come for whatever reason.
Right.
And you need to simulate that because that is
Could be
not,
just the economy. It could be
it
anything.
could be a number of things.
Right.
And no one ever says what happens when.
Right.
Do I have?
Well, I don't want to talk about that because I want to talk about my new
But
helicopter.
But isn't it 80-90% of the business? And what happens
Right.
is if I put a P&L together and do a forecast, and then and everybody should do this, and they should say 8 months, 9 months, 10 months from now,
Yeah.
what I want to happen, expect to happen, and for people who pray and but what I believe will happen is not going to happen.
Right.
And therefore, based upon all of my expenses, this is what the picture is going to look like. If I could look ahead and say 8 months from now, if the worst case scenario is going to be this, am I able to tolerate that?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Then now I'm not going to be in shock
Right.
if that unfolds.
Right.
And what that will do is perhaps energize, motivate me to say what can I do to avoid those things
Right.
from happening. And then also the other piece that people don't do is they aren't prepared
Right.
for that to happen.
It is.
So you need to do that simulation. You need to do the simulation of the theoretical. Now I'm going to hit everything,
Yeah.
and then you make sure that your numbers are right. And then the other simulation is what if the doors are just blown off.
Right.
How am I going to handle that? And most people,
Upsize good.
most people,
And
don't
how many
do
times
that work?
have we seen it? People that we know go into business and they're just overwhelmed with customers.
Mm-hmm.
People go, yeah, I like that. I want that. And they're not able, they don't have the suppliers in line.
Yep.
They don't have the resources to upgrade. I've had a number, the lady I just mentioned, Rhonda, she didn't have her own kitchen. She didn't have her own stuff. She was renting from someone. When she went from just making cakes for aunts
Right.
and uncles and birthdays and so on, and went to a commercial, we're in business kind
Right.
of thing. She was almost overwhelmed.
My-
She was.
My chapter 13, which eventually led to my chapter 7 bankruptcy, was because we grew too fast. We went from the number 10 franchise in St. Louis to the number 1 in the country in 1 year.
Wow. Yeah.
We're doing business with Fortune 100 companies, AT&T, Citicorp, Ralston Purina, Monsanto. I can name
All of
them
that.
all.
Yeah.
We're just, I
go.
tell the story, the future was so bright we were wearing sunglasses.
That's right.
And we're just growing and growing and growing. And what happened, and so these are things that people do that leads to failure. And so what occurred is that I didn't have the capacity, details. I started cutting corners. I couldn't keep up with.
Right.
It
a
was
panic
just,
mode,
it was,
isn't it?
it
It's
was,
kind of
it
a
was,
panic.
not only did I not know what I didn't know, then you're out spending money. You're not able to track things. And so this, having not sat down and said, well, suppose you get what you wanted and more.
Right.
Right. Simple. And I can't tell you how many times I will go to a customer and do things. And I remember a day, there was 2 moments in my life where I was drinking from a fire hose and it basically killed me. And it caused, it tested characters. It's like putting too much air in a balloon or you do it too quickly.
Right.
And you put it in a balloon and what does it do? It pops. So now I'm guilty, gang, of I cannot let you escape without hearing all of these things that lead up to failure. So we've been talking about, Jim, the top 5 to top 10 things, but we're going to have to do
Another
second
session.
installment
This is starting
because
to
I
be a
want
habit.
you. Yeah, it's a habit. You told me I was a liar, but no, I'm giving the people more than what they asked for, and so I'm going to see you next time where we're talking about the top 10 things that typically leads to failure. This is Glenn and Jim Chambers. Win with Glenn. I'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for the Win with Glenn video podcast. Stay connected by following and subscribing to this podcast on these platforms. Join us every week as Glenn and special guests give you the tools you need to grow and have a successful business or career.